And this next section is about how we converted these meal plans into shopping lists and what that means for all the different small decisions that are taken that we had to take as a research team, but that people are taking all the time and as they're converting what it is that they want to eat and what feels right to them and a good balance for their families and with the decisions that actually happen when we're shopping for this food. So how did we cost, dignity, and choice into our shopping list? And before we dive right into the actual cost, because I'm sure you're curious, I just want to be clear and reiterate again that we built these together. We built them from the ground up and we built them from the foundations of the family's lives themselves. And we also built the shopping list based on the preferences and the discussions from all the rich discussions that we were having with the community advisors throughout the whole year. So where they might have suggested a particular brand or where a brand made a real difference to someone's feeling of self-worth, for example, or where a brand where it wasn't possible at all in our healthy swaps discussion to swap out, for example, a low sugar version of baked beans, where from our desks we might do that. In our conversations, it wasn't possible. We wanted to be as true to those discussions as we could as we went through this. And it was a really sort of back and forth, step-by-step process. And there wasn't anything linear about this. It's a very complex thing to do. And there isn't really clear guidelines on what portion sizes we should be eating. And so, of course, when we try to calculate that all out, it makes a difference if you're eating a large bowl of cereal or a small bowl of cereal and what that means to you versus what it means to nutritionists versus what it means to the manufacturers. And we had to take all of those sorts of things into consideration. All of the families had designed some recipes for the work that they were doing. So you just saw some of those dinners that they might have been preparing. So the spaghetti bolognese recipe we would have used to build into the shopping list as well. We wanted to take into consideration nutritional guidelines and nutritional analysis. And so we were continuously working back and forth with a nutrition software and working with public health colleagues of ours who gave us additional support on understanding the overall energy intake, the proportion of fats and saturated fats to other groups, things like fiber, iron, protein levels, all these things. So even though that wasn't the main focus and we weren't able to reach a perfect diet for the families in terms of the nutrition side of the conversation, it was always in the balance and always in the mix of what we were aiming for. And of course, the reality of people's lives and what it is that people actually do was a big part of it as well. And at the top here, we had those group discussions, priorities, values, and preferences really driving all of it. So you'll see in a moment when we go back out into the breakout rooms that the shopping lists are essentially sort of broken down into a range of different categories. So some of these things will be purchased in a shop, and some of these things are about, do take into consideration sort of the costs of eating out, holidays, birthdays, and those kinds of things. We also have a category in here for guests and visitors because it was important to each one of the groups to think about the food that they would need to have on hand in case their children's friends came over or they wanted to have people around for a cup of tea or something like this. And so some of the categories, so as I say, you'll be looking at these in a little bit more detail. I'm just gonna flag that for now. To explain what it was that we did, we did all of our costings. The costings that you'll see are from as if we purchased them at Tesco online. And we know that not everybody shops at Tesco online. And it's not possible for us to, in one place, have the cost of a shopping list that would reflect the shopping practices of everybody actually living in Scotland today. But what we needed was a baseline. We needed some sort of way that we could replicate time and time again to see whether any costs had changed over time. So we've used this, which is the same way that the Minimum Income Standard Research Group, which help on our steering group and are really well known across the UK for similar work across not just food costs, but everything about people's lives costs. use Tesco as well. It still is the biggest shop, and it's the one that you can get all of the different things that you need from. So there's nothing in particular about it. I understand that people will be concerned about just having priced a Tesco online, but that's the rationale for it. The prices that you will see are from this week, like literally earlier this week. I ran the costings for the families that we've done. We have comparison costs for earlier in the year, which I'm sure people would be interested in as well. We're not presenting those today, but there's been a slight increase for each of the families that we'll be talking to, just based on what Tesco Online has available to it from November of last year compared to today. So of course, this is all taking place in the context of rising food costs. But just so that you know, from some more decisions that we made within the selection criteria. So we selected for branded items when that was discussed by the groups. When it wasn't discussed by the groups, we selected the second cheapest item. We wanted to make sure that people weren't required to buy the cheapest item when doing their shopping, and because sometimes that can affect people's dignity and their ability to make choices around things that, say, their children enjoy, and not being able to afford that would make a big difference about the relationship that they had with being able to say yes sometimes, for example. And we also chose the closest packet size that was available when we were making the selections, because we know that not everybody has enough room in their budget to be able to buy in bulk, or room in their house to be able to buy in bulk. So we wanted to account for that somehow. I just also want to say, when at the end of having done a lot of this really detailed work and behind the scenes, we went back to each of the groups and talked through them. Every single item was confirmed by the groups. They all looked at each of the brands. They looked at the amounts that were included in the shopping list. The groups signed off on the balance of what was included. And this was just a quote from one of the group discussions where people were reviewing and reflecting on what we had done as a group together. And I just think it's really powerful, because the point here is that, yes, there are going to be some things in this list that aren't specific to me, or specific to you, or specific to your neighbor. But we were trying to find a balance that was relatable and recognizable to people in lots of different parts of this country. And as this person, that one of our community advisors put it, it's about being normal. Looking across the list, the thing that popped out for her was, yeah, maybe it's not exactly, maybe it's easier for us to say what we would like to do, or what we might do in an ideal world. But actually, to be normal people, you don't want to be a really socially bizarre person that absolutely rejects all the normal things that your peers have and want. So that's what sort of underpins the work. And that's where the themes come in around keeping that balance throughout the whole of it. So in our final breakout room for today, we're going to be reviewing the costs and the categories of the families that you've been working with. And I want you to consider what additional costs there might be. So we don't know where this family lives. If this family lived in a particular part of Glasgow, getting to the shops from their house would cost differently than it would from where I live, where I can walk to the shop, for example. And similarly, if you were living in Highland, what would you have to do to add things like public transport or petrol costs? But first, I just want you to take a little bit of time to reflect on what the cost categories look like and how they're sort of balancing out across each other. So back into your breakout rooms for now.